Welcome everybody. We're gonna get rolling. It is the Lincolnville Selectmen's meeting. It is April 8th. We're getting going a little bit late. We had to have an executive session with our town attorney. To get us rolling, David, would you care to read the quote of the evening?
Certainly. A wise son brings joy to his father, but a foolish son brings grief to his mother. Solomon.
Thank you. At this point, I would love to open the podium for any non-agenda items. Seeing nobody rushing up to the podium, let's move along to the administrator's report.
That was quick. Nomination papers are still available for the positions of Selectmen, School Committee, Five-Town CSD Board, and Budget Committee. They need to be returned by this Friday afternoon, close of business, 4:30. For anybody that's interested, you need at least 25 qualified signatures and no more than 100. Last meeting, we also talked about the fire station well and the issue from the solar. We still have the issue, although we seem to have made a little bit of progress earlier today in terms of we might have to swap out the overload protection device for a different device. And when I say we, I'm not quite sure who the we is, whether it be the town or Revision or somebody. That's still to be worked out, but I think we have a solution, and it's just a matter of verifying it with the pump and then figuring out who's paying for it. And otherwise than that, besides the agenda items, I don't have anything else to share.
Any questions for David? Okay, let's move along to upcoming meetings and announcements.
All meetings are here at the town office unless announced otherwise. Looks like a quiet, oh, this is not right. We have a budget committee meeting tomorrow evening. They're meeting with the Lincolnville Central School Committee to review the budget. That meeting starts at 6 o'clock here in the town office. The town office will be closed next Monday in observance of Patriots Day, and the Board of Selectmen will meet next on Monday, April 22nd, 6 p.m.
Thank you very much. Are there any upcoming community events anyone wishes to share?
We have a roadside cleanup sponsored by Midcoast Waste Watch and the Lincolnville Community Library. It is on April 19th and April 20th. We're meeting at the community library at 9 a.m. both days. On Friday, it runs from 9 to 5, and on Saturday from 9 to noon. We are supplying the pickers, the safety vests, gloves, and all the other safety equipment. So hope you can all attend.
Super. Hopefully it's sunny, warm weather for you.
Me too.
Okay. Let's move along to the meeting minutes from the 25th of March.
I move that the board approve the March 25th, 2019 meeting minutes as presented.
And I'll second it.
Moved and seconded. In discussion, I would just like to point out that between lines 110 and 111, I just wanted to clarify my sentiment of, I wanted to make clear that I believe my words were I don't care what's happening in other towns, and that I want to focus more on what's happening with Lincolnville, but it doesn't have to be that blunt. But that's the general gist of it, as opposed to the opposite that was presented here.
So if I just put Lately doesn't care.
That would be incorrect.
Oh. Well, I got
that my primary focus is Lincolnville's issues.
Thanks.
So that's the only amendment I would wish to change. So if there's support for that, could you amend your motion?
I will amend my motion. I move that the board approve the March 25th, 2019 meeting minutes as adjusted.
And I'll amend my second.
Thank you very much. Any further discussion? Seeing nothing, all those in favor? Thank you very much. And we have our superintendent of the Five-Town CSD before us. We have a PowerPoint presentation, is that correct?
For works.
Potentially.
And your two.
And we have our representatives here before us. Right there. So I'm Marie Libby, superintendent of the 5-town CSD, and two of our school board representatives are here. The two from Lincolnville, David Perkins and Andrea Police. And I am presenting to you the 5-town CSD requested budget. Just wanted to start with a reminder of what the mission of the high school is, and that is a learning community that fosters intellectual and creative excellence while building strong character. And as we developed our budget this year, we used 5 basic filters to help us determine what we're going to put in the budget and what we weren't going to put in the budget. And those 5 filters are: what is in the best interest of our students, what is needed for continual improvement, how are we prioritizing quality instruction, what is needed to move forward on our strategic plan, and what is fiscally responsible to our taxpayers. So I'm going to start with the bottom line of our budget. The bottom line is that our expense increase is 2.89%, and that results in an overall taxpayer impact when you put our expense budget together with our revenue lines to 4.02%. And just to give you some context for the high school, these are our 10 years worth of enrollments, October 1st enrollments, and the projected enrollment for next year. And our numbers have stayed pretty strong the last 4 years, particularly the last 3 years, and certainly next year, in large part because of the tuition students that we're getting from St. George. We probably have close to 40 students from St. George at our high school, and that really has made a difference in our enrollment. And they pay tuition to us as well, so it's also made a difference in our revenues. This is the 10-year budget increases. The top line is the change to our expense budget, and the bottom line is the change to the taxpayer. And next year's amounts are in bold. So that's 2.89% to the expenses and 4.02% to the taxpayers. And you can see our 10-year average. It's just over 2 for the expense budget and 2.75 for the taxpayer impact. And you can see, just to be reminded, you can see in 2017 we had a change to the taxpayer of negative 4.51%. And that is the year that the state of Maine started subsidizing public schools who were minimum receivers who had public debt service on their school for construction. And so Camden and Rockport, because they were minimum receivers, fit that bill, and the state started subsidizing us pretty significantly for the amount of debt service we were paying. So our debt payment was on the order of $900,000 a year for the high school, and the state started subsidizing us between $700,000 and $800,000 a year. So almost the entire amount we were paying. And so that was a major windfall year for us. And some people ask, when will we feel the impact of not having to pay for the high school anymore? And the answer is that we felt it in 2017, because right now, this going into next year's budget, we are no longer paying interest on that bond payment, and it's 100% principal, and the state is paying us 100% of what we are paying for debt. So when we stop paying for the high school debt service in November of 2021, the state will also stop sending us a subsidy for it. So it'll be a net zero, and we won't really feel that impact because we already felt it in 2017. So I'm going to take you through each line of the budget. I'll try to go pretty quickly, but if you have questions, feel free to ask. So we have about maybe 10 articles to go through. The first one is our biggest line, and that is regular instruction. That includes teacher salaries, health benefits, teacher supplies, teacher professional development, and contracted services. You can see the change for next year is 4.98% increase. In this line, we have a new innovation center that we are developing called the Hatchery for next year. So that is an expense that's in this line. We also have wage increases per the contracts. The base increase for the teachers is 2.25%. For the ed techs and bus drivers, food service and custodian is 2%. In addition to that, unless you're a veteran, the veteran teachers or the veteran employees maybe make the amount increase that you're seeing here because they're at the top of the scale. But people within the scale jump up a step each year until about 20 years. So people within the scale have another increase on top of this increase. And that varies pretty significantly. I would say between 5 and 18% increases in some cases if they're making a big jump in the steps. And health increases we budgeted at 7%. So I just want to tell you a little bit about the hatchery. The little tagline for the hatchery is where ideas are nurtured and hatched. And it's kind of all about design thinking. We are going to, within the hatchery, we will offer coursework to students. And we are partnering with a school in Cambridge, Massachusetts, that its entire program is based on innovation. And so that's the only curriculum they have. And a number of us did an innovation tour in Boston, and we visited a number of places, and the New View School was one of the places we visited. And we've decided to partner with them. And that partnership will include a full-time innovation coach, a lot of professional development, and other resources that they have. The hatchery will also include a makerspace, and we are doing that in our former industrial arts space. So that will be slightly redesigned. Half of that space will be redesigned to become a makerspace. And we hope to have a significant amount of community integration with this initiative. We plan to offer like innovation cafe nights. We want to have a speaker series. We've been partnering with a number of organizations. We've been talking to Pup Tech. We have been to Orno, to the Innovation Center up there. They have helped us a lot. We've been to Orno's Fab Lab. We've done a lot of work in developing the concept for the hatchery. There will be teachers who just within their regular courses can also try to integrate innovation into their regular curriculum. It's kind of outside of the hatchery. And we also want students to be able to access the hatchery just on their own without having to go through a course in order to become involved, like in the makerspace or whatever it is. So that when students have study hall, if they want to go to the makerspace, they could. Our makerspace will offer some mini courses like how to use a 3D printer, how to use a laser cutter, and how to use a lot of the equipment that will be in the makerspace, so that students can maybe get certified and come down and use the equipment anytime that they would like. We'd also like to try to integrate some of that with adult education and have adult ed be doing some things in the makerspace. And a vision that we have is to further renovate the industrial arts space and put a second floor on part of it to create a classroom, co-working space, event space, that would be a space where the community could come and we could have events. And you know, I have a vision that people who are entrepreneurs in our towns could come and work out of that space and rub elbows with our students and see what happens. But we are planning to apply for grant money for some of the renovations that we're talking about. Special education is an 8.95% increase, and that's primarily due to a private tuition payment of $35,000 that we have next year. We're also, because expenses in this line were so high, we've reduced the contingency in this line by $20,000. We also had to move, the Zenith is our alternative ed program. We've had a tutor in that program that's been paid by federal money, but we can't use federal money next year because the federal money is needed for the increased needs that our students have in associated services like speech and language, occupational therapy, physical therapy. We have to use our money for those things. So the Zenith tutor is being absorbed in the regular budget, and that's another pretty big line. And then just the regular increases in wages and health. Our Midcoast School of Technology program assessment, which is our share of the Midcoast cost that the state doesn't cover, is increasing 8.27%. It's only a $5,000 change. This is a huge difference as well that occurred last year, where our debt service, not our debt service, our payment to Midcoast in terms of the 5-town CSD's share of the payment to run Midcoast had been $1.1 million. We were very lucky that the state decided to pay for CTE programming out of the general fund before they made the assessments to schools like us. So all of a sudden, this year is our first year that our payment this year went from over $1 million to only $61,000. So you would think, wow, did we get a big windfall from that as well, because we didn't have such a big expense? Well, I look at it as, fortunately, it coincided with the year we started paying for the new Midcoast School of Technology building. And our debt service contribution to the new building is like $800,000. So what we saved from not having to pay our normal payment was made up for in the debt service that we now have to pay for the new building. Other instruction is a line that includes co-curricular athletics and summer school. There's a 5.1% increase in this line. That's mostly due to activity and athletic stipend wage increases. And there are also some increases in contracted services. Some of the officiating fees are going up. Student and staff support is another line, and that includes technology, the library, counseling services, health services, and instructional training. This line's going down slightly, and you know, sometimes just changes in a single person's change in their health insurance election can make a pretty significant change in that line in the budget. And in this case, my guess is that we were paying for somebody's health insurance, and then they could get on their spouse's health insurance, and we no longer had to pay. So that's probably what that meant, or somebody went from family to single, and that's another pretty big difference in our costs. We also have some reduced lease payments on computers and other things we're leasing. Same with the non-lease purchases. We're just not buying as many computers as we had to last year. And we've had a slight increase in curriculum software. And there is an increase in this line for an equity initiative that we are working on. And you'll see some more things about the equity initiative later in some other lines, but the way it impacted this line is that we're paying for all sophomores to take the PSATs. And the reason why we're doing that is because you may know that in the state of Maine, the required state assessment for 11th graders is the SAT. And so there are a number of students in our school who just show up for the SAT and they've never had any kind of practice test for it, and they have to take it, and it's a fairly important test for students who are planning to go on to secondary education. And it also makes a difference in even the school's year-to-year assessment by the state of Maine. So a lot of students are disadvantaged if they can't afford to take the PSAT because it costs money and time. And so the high school is looking at ways to try to close that equity gap, and this was one of the ideas that they came up with, to pay for the PSAT so that all students took it their sophomore year. So everybody goes into the SAT having had at least one chance to do a practice test. System administration has a 7.33% increase, and that's partly just because of wage and benefit increases, but we're also adding a position into our districts, the Director of Development and Communications, and that position is a half-time position that will be shared by the two districts. So each district will have a quarter time of that person. School administration has a slight increase of 4.02%. Again, an increase because of a change in a staff health insurance election that probably went up instead of down for that one, and then the typical wage and benefit increases. Transportation, we're not seeing a change at all. We just did a 3-year contract. This spring, we signed a 3-year contract with Loose Transportation, who provides transportation to Hope Abbott and Lincolnville students at the high school. And there's a 0% increase next year in that contract. And then the SAD increase is really it's actually a slight decrease. So it's negligible, though it doesn't really impact that. Our ops and maintenance line has a very small increase of 0.3%. We do have increased electricity costs. I don't know if you're seeing this in the town, but just the cost of electricity is increasing for us. We have capacity charges that are increasing, and it's just costing more. It's not because of increased usage, it's increased cost in electricity. We have also had a reduction in our contracted repairs line. We are adding $75,000 to the capital reserve fund at the high school. And we will also be asking to spend $50,000 from that capital reserve fund. And we're just, this includes a full-time sub that's a custodian that's going to be split between the 2 districts, but that's instead of having to find a sub every day that somebody's out. Somebody's almost always out in our custodial services. So the facilities director decided it would just be more efficient to hire a full-time sub rather than to have to scramble and find a sub every day. Our debts and other commitments is going down by 3.94%, and that's because we have a decrease in our CTE debt service. We will see a decrease every year in that line because, you know, the first payment for that construction is the highest payment, and then the interest, the amount of interest that we're paying goes down each year. So there's been a decrease in that. And we are no longer paying interest for the high school, so there's a decrease in the high school's debt service as well. Our other costs include the board contingency and food service subsidy, and there's an increase of 12.33%. And this was the other equity initiative that I was referring to earlier. And that is to enable students who are on reduced lunch to eat for free, breakfast and lunch, to make sure that no students are hungry at our school. The high school's also doing some other food-related initiatives that aren't costing taxpayers any money, and they're getting funding in other ways. And one of those is they're going to have a room basically that's full of food that students can just go to and get food if they're hungry. We have a lot of students who stay after school who might not have food and can't buy food, and so that could be there for them to tide them over between the end of school and their sports or theater or whatever they might be staying for. And that room will also be a place where students who don't have enough food on the weekends can go on a Friday and get food that they want for the weekend. And so people say, well, how are you going to control the students who don't need that food but go in that room and cannibalize the shelves? And the answer to that is that we are trusting our student body to understand what the food is there for, and we're trusting them to be responsible and respectful of the food that is there for students who need it. So this is just a summary of everything that I've just gone through with you that shows each line and the change in that line, and then the overall impact to the expense budget of 2.89%. This table shows the percent that each line is of the entire budget. So you can see that our regular instruction is 40% of our budget. Debt service, which is, you know, relatively high, is 13%. So, you know, that will be going down as time goes on. And then you can sort of see on down where those costs are and what is the most significant parts of our budget. This is our revenue line, and it's in summary form. Our tuition revenue will go down a little bit next year. I think we're gonna have a fewer St. George students than we had this current year that we're in. Our interest on investments, which is not a whole lot of money to begin with, but that has gone up slightly. Our receipts from
athletics and activities is going up a little bit. We're starting to take the gate receipts for hockey games because the high school is gradually over time taking over the cost for ice time. And in that same time, we're also taking over receiving the gate receipts for the games. And the state subsidy is the really only other point of interest on this chart. And the state subsidy has gone down a little bit. And that is mainly because the debt service has gone down a little bit. So our total revenues are down slightly, down 2.51%. Here's a slide that everybody waits for. It's a breakdown between the 5 towns. And the top matrix is what we've already gone over, the increase in expenses, the decrease in revenues, and the overall taxpayer impact. So the reason why the taxpayer impact, you know, is different than the increase in expenses is because we've had a decrease in revenues. And then you can see how it breaks down between the 5 towns. And what we've put in the green box is the percent increase or decrease in that town. Then below that is the amount of the increase. And then it's the estimated cost per $100,000 of for home ownership. And then the median single family value of a house in each town and what that increase means for a median single family home. So in Lincolnville, the median single family homeowner will be paying $40.11 more next year in their taxes because of the 5-town CSD budget. And in Lincolnville, Appleton, and Hope, those, you know, these percentages change slightly every year. And it changes slightly because of property valuations and because of the number of students from each town who are relatively attending. So like in the high school, Camden and Rockport, Camden has a higher percentage than Rockport does. And that is because next year there are more students from Camden at the high school than in Rockport. But in our K-8 system, Rockport's is triple Camden, because at the K-8 level, I think all those kids from Camden are in 8th grade and they're all entering the high school, and it's totally shifting the balance at K-8. So it really depends year to year how many kids there are, who moved into town. 3 kids in Appleton, Hope, and Lincolnville can make a big difference in the percentage. So those things are, it's impossible for us to predict. And we don't know what's gonna happen with property valuations in any given year, but that's how it all played out this year. We carry a fund balance of $1.2 million, and school districts need to carry a pretty hefty fund balance because we have to essentially carry enough money to pay all the teachers if the district were to close. At the end of this year, if the 5-town CSD were to cease to exist, we still owe all the teachers through the end of August. So we have to carry enough money in the unlikelihood that that would happen. And then on top of that, we don't have a lot. We have $14,152 that's unassigned in our fund balance. Although the fund balance itself is a pretty secure place, we're not expecting the 5-town CSD to fold at any time in the near future. And then we also have a capital reserve that is also quite healthy. And at the end of this year, we're projecting it to be $576,802. And at the end of next year, after we add and then we use some, we expect it to be $601,802. It's, you know, 10 years ago, we didn't have any capital reserve fund. We're happy that we have this, in particular at the high school, because we know that we'll have some projects coming up. The high school's turning 20, and we know that there will be some needs, and we're trying to build up our capital reserve so that we can pay for some of the things, whether it's an unexpected repair, and sometimes expected repairs we'll plan to pay for it out of the capital reserve. We do have one capital reserve warrant article that will hopefully be approved at the May budget meeting, and that's just allowing us to transfer money from unexpended fund balances into the capital reserve fund. and then use up to $200,000 from those funds for either what we have listed, which is the two $25,000 projects, or any unexpected things. We always ask to spend more than what we think we're gonna spend, because we don't know if there's gonna be some emergency, and we don't have to go back out if there were some emergency that costs less than $200,000. So the two things that we know we want to use the capital reserve for next year is an engineering and heat recovery survey. Basically, it's just for the service, not to do the work. Our facilities manager feels like we can realize a lot of savings by doing something with our HVAC system and capturing more of our heat. So he's going to have some work done to do the engineering to see if that actually is all true, and then probably the next year would put in to do some of the work, which he thinks will save us a lot of money in the long run. And then we have some money budgeted for a makerspace renovation. And then we also have adult ed expenses. And adult ed, you know, there's never too much variation one way or the other in our adult ed program. There's just a 0.8% expense increase. We do have some increase in people's instructional hours and changes in health insurance, but we've gone down in some areas. And our revenue line always matches the expense line. The nice piece about this is if you look at everybody's, the change in each town, every town has gone down, and that's because we are getting additional state subsidy. So that's helped all the town assessments to decrease because of the extra amount we've gotten in revenue from the state. So in general, what this budget does, it supports the opening of the hatchery while balancing other priorities that we have. It uses some existing resources and some new resources to do that. We fund a number of equity initiatives, and we are efficiently anticipating needs in technology and facilities. What this budget doesn't do is it does not fully fund the media position that is currently open in our high school. We're advertising that as a half-time position for next year so that we could use some of the money from that position to help pay for the partnership to open the Innovation Center. But we plan to pull that back up to a full-time position the following year. And our next steps are to finalize the last adjustments, revenues. We actually aren't finalizing. I probably should have updated this before we sent it to David, because we have finalized everything. The CSD board has approved this budget, so this is the budget that will go to town votes. So they approved this budget on April 3rd. There will be a town budget hearing on May 21st to approve all the different articles, and then a town vote on the overall budget on June 11th. We have a two-step process to approve our vote, to approve our budget. And that's the end of my presentation. I don't know if anybody has any questions they'd like to ask. Any questions for Maria?
I just want to say that the hatchery sounds really exciting, and especially the makerspace. So it's great to hear that that's happening.
Yeah, thanks.
It does sound really exciting. I was just curious what percentage or amount of the regular instruction that represents.
I think that the cost of the partnership, it's not all added new, but the total cost of that partnership is going to be $125,000. So it includes the person and all the resources that will come with that. Mm-hmm. And I think that was an add of maybe $37,000 to the budget, and we paid for it in other ways within the budget that we already had.
Okay.
And then that's just in the instructional line. You know, you saw like ops and maintenance. We're going to use some money from the capital reserve fund to do some renovations with a makerspace. And in the ops and maintenance line, I think we have some money, $10,000 for equipment in there as well for the makerspace. So it's in 3 different places. The largest impact, though, is in regular instruction.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any questions? No? Thank you
Okay.
so much for coming.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you both.
Okay, bye.
You can hang out. We've got more exciting stuff to talk about.
Street lights.
Hot topic.
And next up before us, we have the representative from the Lobster Pound Restaurant, Lafayette Lincolnville LLC, here for a renewal. Anyone have any questions? So patiently sitting.
I move that the board approve and sign the liquor license application submitted by the Lincolnville Lobster Pound.
I'll second it.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing nothing, all those in favor? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
We
you.
really appreciate you coming out on a snowy night. And David, do you want to give a little preamble on agenda item number 9? We have Chief Deputy Trundy of the Waller County Sheriff's Office here.
Sure. Chief Deputy Trundy reached out a number of weeks ago regarding possibly utilizing some office space here in the town office. Last meeting, the board took a quick tour through the building and said, why don't you ask Chief Deputy Trundy or some representative from Waldo County Sheriff's to come make a presentation, and here he is.
Let's invite you to the podium.
Sorry.
Good evening. I'm not sure if there were specific questions everybody wanted answered, but I'll give you a brief summary of what I was thinking of, and we'll go from there. So, as you know, a few years ago, there was a grant that came out, the Burn Jag grant, that was partially used by Lincolnville to purchase the speed board that you guys have now. So that grant has closed, but the 2017 grant money has finally become available. And so as part of the process of looking at what we wanted to do with that, one of the ideas that Sheriff Trafton and I had come up with was to develop a number of substations, is basically what we refer to them as. So we recognize that the way we are configured at the Sheriff's Office right now, we have computers in the vehicles, but they are limited in some of the capacity that they have as far as when they're preparing, officers are preparing reports and that type of thing. So they do still come back to our office where we have a number of computers that have more capacity and capabilities. So they spend a certain amount of time at the office doing reports, doing things that they have to do, which takes them out of the patrol zones that they cover. And we have 3 patrol zones in Waldo County. And so as a result of the calls for service and working at the office, there are certain areas in the county that we don't get to as often as we would like to. And that often tends to be the outlying areas, either Lincolnville or maybe Winniport or out into the Unity area. You tend to get out into those outlying areas more when you have a call, but if there's no other call and you're going from one to another, you tend not to get out here as much, which results in folks from those communities not seeing us. And it just so happens that Lincolnville, Unity, and Winniport are 3 of our largest communities outside of the city of Belfast. So part of our idea was that if we could find willingness with those 3 towns, that we would like to develop a substation in there. And our only real requirement for a substation, we have certain requirements, excuse me, because some of the information that we have that we can access through our computers is protected by certain guidelines by the FBI. They do require that the room where our computer sits is locked so that just anyone can't get in there and gain access to the computer. But that's really the only substantial requirement that we have. So it can be any size space, and something that if the towns have that they're willing to share with us. And so we were hoping to do that. Part of my goal would be, instead of having the officers come back to the sheriff's office to write their reports, that when they were out and about, if they were close by the town, they could swing in here and get that done. Part of my process for thinking of that was that it would create an opportunity for the officers to be at a town office where folks from the community were coming in and out to do other types of business, where they'd be able to interact with the officers and talk with them. And I know just from my own personal experience, when I often go into these towns for different purposes, I'll have people see me and recognize who I am and want to stop and talk to me about a particular problem they have, whether it's a speeding issue or a family matter or something else. So my hope is to get the officers into this town, to Lincolnville, Unity, and Winterport more often, and to get them interacting with people in the community more. So that's kind of my motivation for wanting to do it. I think I got an initial quote from our technology folks, and the amount of money we have in the grant will just about cover setting up the things. So there'll be no cost to the town for the setup of the computers or any of the stuff that we need there. And all we need is a locked room if the town decides that you have interest in having us here.
So, thank you for thinking outside the box. Okay, that's really cool. So, and I understand the locked room, and I understand why it needs to be secure. Does that mean no one else within this the town office has access to it? I mean, it's clearly possible someone might need to get in there for something. I'm not sure if it were in this, and I don't even know why. But I'm just thinking, we have a custodian, you know, it cleans the place. I'm sure you would want it cleaned from time to time. And would you be coming and going after hours? You would be.
Yeah, that would be the intention. I mean,
Yep.
We wouldn't have to. I mean, if the town decided that you wanted to give a space and you preferred that we only utilized it when town staff was here, then we certainly could live within that. But if there was equipment here and if we had that capacity, it would, I guess from our point of view, it would be nice to be able to access it, because we never know when we might be able to use it. And it would be good for the night shift guys to be able to come in and do a report there and to be in town as well. But if that was a limitation the town sought to put on it, and we certainly would live within that.
And you would seek to solely have this be an administrative space? There wouldn't be, say, persons of interest or any other kind of guests of the Waldo County Sheriff Department needing to be brought into that space? It's just purely an administrative type use is what you're thinking?
It could be. I mean, it doesn't say that if the town had, I mean, let me put it this way. If the town wanted to say that they would prefer that that's how it be used and that we not have folks from the public come in, then we certainly would live within that guideline. I mean, we're willing to work out about any agreement that you guys are agreeable to. I could see where it could be beneficial if somebody was in the area and we wanted to meet them there to do an interview. We certainly could do that, but we have certain limitations when we do certain types of interviews. Law requires that they're recorded. So we have interview rooms at the sheriff's office that have video, and so they're designed specifically for that. So they're really ideal for that. But we do have body cameras, we have in-car cameras, we do have other ways of recording, so we can do it remotely. But again, we're very flexible, and if the town set up some guidelines or some things that you wanted to see in order for us to utilize that space, we certainly would be willing to be flexible in any of that.
Does it specifically have to be a PC, or I'm just trying to think outside the box in terms of providing a secure location? I'm just looking at our media setup here and would a locked storage closet for the essentially electronic information and equipment needed to be protected, would that fall under that space? So if one of our sheriffs needed to use the space, that they could utilize it much in the way that so many of our committees or the select board or whatnot could access the secure location, take the items out, or even, you know, sort of pull up a chair. And then when, you know, the area is done being used, it could be secured, so that it wasn't, I'm just thinking in terms of, and I have no resolution whatsoever in terms of where I land on this thing. I think having an increased presence of the Waldo County Sheriffs would be great for so many reasons. But I have reservations in terms of having such a community spot. I mean, I can think of very few areas in this building that, you know, I could think of just being like, okay, that's the sheriff's, that whole space. So if it were a possibility to think outside the box a little bit and dedicate a lockable space that isn't necessarily a room, I don't know if that's a possibility.
Yeah, the requirement basically requires that wherever the computer is, that we can secure that. So
Okay.
if there was a space, say, you know, similar to, I'll just use this as an example,
Sure.
and if we could secure that door and there was a space there where the deputy's the only one, or the sheriff's office employees are the only ones that had the key to access that, that would suffice.
Okay.
We just need to be able to secure the computer so that somebody from the general public couldn't gain access to the information on it.
Okay. And would there be other administrative needs, such as, you know, I mean, certainly a printer or whatever. I'm just thinking, what sort of other administrative support could you foresee the sheriff's department wanting?
When I asked for the quote from our technology folks, I basically asked them for a self-contained quote, so that basically to throw in everything that they thought we would possibly need without having to utilize anything from the municipality that we were talking to. So internet, you know, we'll use a hotspot, or if we decide we want to print it, all of that would be included in the cost of the setup. So we wouldn't be utilizing any resources here other than maybe the electricity from the wall that we plug into, and that would be it.
Okay.
Well, thinking on your terms there again a little bit, just throwing out there for kicks and grins, if we took a podium-sized area that you put the computer, the printer, and everything else in it, and had a locked closet that it could be wheeled out in, you could basically, you don't need to have a dedicated room that needs to be dedicated to just you all the time. You just need to have your stuff locked somewhere except when you're using it, correct?
Yes, we need to be able to secure the equipment.
Right, so, but in a nutshell, it could be mobile and move in somewhere else and then move into a room that was available. It might not necessarily have to be the same room all the time. I'm asking, I'm not, I'm just throwing that out there for kicks and grins.
Like
I don't wanna give up any space, I'm cheap,
Yeah.
I don't wanna give up any space, I'll admit it. You know, I love the idea, I'd love to have you do it, but I don't really see where we're gonna saw a hole in the wall and make a good space for this.
No.
I mean, that's in my opinion, you know, which is just one of us, but, that's why I'm saying if it was mobile and portable, you could basically, if one office space was busy, your officer could wheel it into a different room and do whatever he needs to do and wheel it back to wherever it needed to be put and lock it up. Is that a feasibility?
I don't know why it wouldn't be.
I mean, that's just what I'm wondering, and that way we wouldn't say that we had to give up this room permanently or that room permanently. We could say, okay, when we're not here, this is the room you can use, have fun. When we're here using it, well, we may ask you if you could use that room.
Yeah. I guess another question I have is, would the Waldo County Sheriff's Department require some sort of legal instrument like a lease or some sort of use agreement of the space for any sort of legal purposes, or would this just be sort of an agreement? Like, how formal does this arrangement need to be?
It can be as formal as you would like it to be, or not. I mean,
Jeez, you're
if
making
there were,
this really easy.
I'm trying to make it easy. I mean, if there were certain guidelines that that you folks wanted us to put in like an MOU, then certainly we could do something like that.
Okay.
I guess I hadn't really envisioned anything with any great legal weight behind it. But if there were concerns about deputies coming in and you wanted to set some guidelines, then we can certainly create an MOU, and then I can create a department policy that mirrored the MOU, and as far as the guidelines for the deputies of what their expectations would be when they were utilizing the space. Or I'm certainly willing to, again, be very flexible if the town wants us to be here.
I mean, in speaking for myself, I feel like clear guidelines, policies, and procedures always help things go smoothly, or identify the outer boundaries, and then maybe require further clarification. Any other immediate questions?
I think this is a great idea in concept. The idea of a lockable space that you can wheel out and then use a room that's free, I think is, if that's possible, that seems to be the best solution. So we're talking about a monitor, a desktop computer, mouse, keyboard. Is that pretty much it?
Yep.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, so I'm wondering what the next steps are, if you have an IT guy, or a person that is developing this plan for the hardware. I'm wondering if the next step that would make sense is vetting that with this person, perhaps scheduling a meeting with, I'll volunteer David, if the board thinks that this is a good idea, your IT representative and yourself, and I don't, if a member of the select board wants to be present too, or just tag David to take notes and, look at what those potential spaces might be, and then go from there.
I'm happy to help David with that, be part of that. And I would just imagine if the lockable space is out here somewhere, then I wouldn't see a problem with having the sheriff's department have access 24 hours a day, because the office would be closed, would be locked, and the other rooms would be secured.
Yep. I mean, certainly we extend that privilege to many of our committees and whatnot, so I couldn't imagine extending it to our law enforcement would be too much of a burden. Does that make sense? Do you need a motion, David, or is general nodding of the head work?
Former Selectman Trundy has that, Josh has that, and I've got your concerns, and
great.
I think we can work with that and make something happen.
Great.
I appreciate the opportunity to
Yeah, well,
talk about it.
Perfect.
Yeah,
Great.
thank you so
Great.
much for the idea.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jason.
There's nothing further on that particular topic. Let's move along to the supplemental charge that we have before us from the Wage and Personnel Policy Board. Or for the Wage and Personnel Policy Board.
Want me to talk again?
Sure. Drive safe.
The board received a request regarding the administrative assistant compensation during budget time. Asked at the last meeting that, excuse me, that perhaps that should be charged to the Wage and Personnel Policy Board first to review what's going on with the job description, what's going on in the world marketplace in terms of employees, and then report back to the board. So put this draft together in hopes that it meets the board's expectations.
Does anyone have any edits or changes or questions regarding the supplemental charge?
I feel the timeline could perhaps be shorter. Yeah, what does the board think? Perhaps maybe a few months earlier than that?
I mean, it seems like in the past, giving a generous timeline doesn't necessarily mean that it happens by then, but, you know, getting everybody in the same room sometimes can prove challenging. I mean, I don't have any strong feelings.
If you pick a date earlier and they don't think they can make it, I'm sure they'll report back that they don't think they can make it.
Yeah.
So,
It's been, from what I remember, usually anytime we've asked them to do anything, it's usually been done post haste, and they've met and done everything. But this
Yeah,
might be an
typically
exception.
though, that's leading up to
Typically-
budget,
Yeah, typically, they usually have been, we ask them to do something within that month, or 4-week time, it usually happens.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you have a recommendation, please feel free to voice it. I don't have a strong feeling.
August 1st. How does that sound?
Well, okay then.
August 1.
Would you care to make a motion then, Josh?
Yes. I move that the board approve and sign the Wage and Personnel Board supplemental charge as amended concerning the administrative assistant position dated April 8th, 2019.
Second.
As amended.
Okay.
As amended.
Yes, thank you. So amended, moved, seconded, further discussion? Seeing nothing, all those in favor? Thank you very much. And moving along to a conversation regarding the Midcoast Solid Waste Corporation landfill closure reserve funds. David, do you care to fill us
Sure.
in?
As you'll recall, in the run-up to last June's town meeting, we were anticipating monies coming back to the 4 towns that make up Midcoast Solid Waste in early fall or late summer regarding our withdrawal from the Municipal Review Committee. The first round of that monies, which is when we sold our ownership interest in PERC back to PERC, the townspeople voted to give that money to Midcoast Solid Waste to be put in the closure fund, or at least Lincolnville did. Camden did, Rockport did, the town of Hope chose not to do that. So that money's been segregated and accounted for, so we know whose is whose when they actually get to landfill closure time. There was still the question about what to do with a larger share of money when that came back. That couldn't really be resolved prior to town meeting to the satisfaction of the 4 towns. Excuse me again. So each town created its own article that was put before the voters regarding that money. Lincolnville's article is included in the back of your packet, which basically said that we would establish a landfill closure and post-closure reserve fund with that, and allow the Board of Selectmen, whatever Board of Selectmen that was at the time, to expend those monies as they saw fit after holding a public hearing. That was approved by the voters. Lincolnville received $223,270.23, which we've subsequently invested through First Advisors, so the amount in there now is greater than that, but that puts it in perspective. We being Midcoast Solid Waste Corporation is required to have an annual audit. They audited the books of the corporation that closed last June. The auditor brought forth the fact that the corporation has a large unfunded liability for the closure of the dump or the landfill portion, the construction demolition debris portion of the landfill. Basically the big mound that everybody sees when you drive in. If you happen to have construction debris and you pay to dispose of it there, at some point that is going to need to be capped and then closed, or closed and then capped in accordance with the current rules and regulations for landfill closure. In addition to that, the towns right now, and will continue for at least 30 years after the closure, will have to be monitoring the groundwater that is around it, or the groundwater that's actually in the quarry. There's quite an expense there. We've known about this expense since probably about the time we started throwing stuff in the quarry, that nothing was free. The audit sets forth or confirms the engineer's estimate of I don't know what our unfunded liability is there, but it's in the millions, $2 or $3 million. We have been setting aside funds for that eventual closure on an annual basis. The thought being, when we got to close, so every ton you put in there, or yeah, it's a ton you put in there, you're charged a certain amount at the gate, and a portion of that is going into the closure fund, so that when we're done filling, they'll have money to close. But it won't have, unless the rates get adjusted upwards substantially, we won't have enough funds for the closure and for the post-closure monitoring of the facility. So the auditor raises a red flag and say, hey, you're not gonna have enough money. And I think the thought has been, for a long time, we've been putting $100,000 into the closure account on an annual basis, we being the corporation, and that we would get to the point where we would have enough money for closure, and then the facility would be closed, and we'd still have $100,000 round number expense going forward, that we wouldn't be, the budget wouldn't be altered. And at one point, the group had discussed taking the monies that were coming back from PERC or the MRC and using those towards closure as well, and that's why we had the article set aside. The auditor is concerned because various towns adopted various different articles, and that money isn't really under the control of the Mid-Coast Solid Waste Corporation Board. In other words, if the voters of the town of Lincolnville had a warrant article that said we want to take that $200,000 and buy a fire truck, they could do that. It's nothing that one town meeting has done in terms of reserve funds that another one couldn't undo. So they asked if the boards would consider a motion, which is included in your packet, that basically would dedicate that fund for closure. Put this in a nice way. It doesn't really matter what you do, because if town meeting wants to undo it, it can and will. But I think it was more of an effort to have the select boards recognize that there was an unfunded liability out there, and to ask us all to adopt that motion. I firmly believe that our motion is more specific than perhaps the other partnering communities, and think if we provided this motion and a certified copy of the town meeting results, that the auditor would be satisfied, and this other motion would be not necessary. But that's me.
Yeah, I mean, I firmly believe, and with all due respect to the Mid-Coast Solid Waste Corporation Board of Directors, that was our intention for drafting Article 21, and then subsequently having that article be approved by the voters. I mean, it's very clear, having those funds in its own account. I mean, I mean, while sure that is a potential of us deciding to have a special town. I mean, like the amount of work that we'd have to go to undo that. And with full recognition of our percentage of closure fees and care and maintenance, I mean, it just, it seems unnecessary.
I mean, even if we spend all that money on something else, we still have the unfunded liability when we have to close it.
Right.
So
It would be a foolish move, yeah.
Yeah, they're gonna get the money one way or the other from us.
So,
Shall I send the motion, I mean, not the motion, send the article and the minutes and see if that satisfies the need, and if it doesn't, then come back and say,
Yep. I would.
yeah. I mean, do you want a motion to that effect from the board
No,
stating that, or?
I'm satisfied to do that. I would do that for anybody that asked.
I mean, I
what's
I
out
feel
there.
like the work that went into having this article adopted speaks for itself in terms of answering the question. So if that doesn't satisfy, then we'll have another conversation.
Yeah, my other semi-concern is this article talks about how you can appropriate the money after having a hearing. I don't know if somebody might constitute tonight's meeting as the hearing, and then take this motion that we've restricted it to this, meaning, okay, you can now send us the money. And I'd prefer not to go down that road. I think I'd want to wait till you were ready to send the money.
Yeah,
I have
yeah.
okay. I will send that article off.
Okay. Anything further on that? Okay. Moving along to sale of surplus items, we had Road Commissioner Young, and we discussed a department tank and pump that we don't use, so we need a motion to allow the sale of that.
I move that the highway department tank and pump be declared surplus and the bid sought for sale.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing nothing, all those in favor? Thank you very much. And hopefully everyone went out and admired or took in each of our municipally owned street lights.
Least,
Right.
sorry.
Things we're responsible for.
Yes.
Illuminating devices that we are municipally responsible for. And we do have some representatives from those that we tasked with taking an assessment of those once upon a time. And so, yeah, I'm curious to hear the board's thoughts.
I do not feel we should remove any lights in the center, in Lincolnville Center.
Okay.
I think it could potentially be safety hazard. I feel the one on, let's see, at the intersection of Route 1 and 173,
Mm-hmm.
I believe that one can go away.
Okay.
Which one? Which one is it?
Route 1 and 173.
At the very top.
Yep. And that's all. I do feel that the one at Route 173 in Youngtown should remain, and I know there's been a lot of talk about that one over the years. Route 173 in Youngtown,
Yeah.
down by the entrance to Bald Rock. I just,
I mean, we just put that in. I mean, that's a
we
recent.
just did that.
Yeah. Recent addition.
I think it serves worthwhile purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the Route 1 and the Whitney Road, that's up out of Lincolnville Beach quite a ways.
Yes.
Mhm.
Opposite, Howe Point Road.
Yes.
Mhm.
I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
There's no
I
foot
could live without
traffic,
that.
no, I mean, my thoughts on it is there's no foot traffic as a rule out that far at night. It's not a major intersection where vehicles are coming onto Route 1
Yeah.
at any vast amount, I mean,
And the reason that I feel that one on Route 1 and 173 right there as you go down, you know, right, that's, if you take that out of the equation, it's still not in good shape down there.
Sure, and I have a copy, if you guys wanna see, of, the recommendations by the committee,
Yep.
for
Is that
necessary.
this one?
Yeah, they
Same.
had,
The same one?
they had a sort of a,
Oh,
Clear
I hate to
matrix
say
of
this,
that.
remember, I ripped mine right in half. I'm sorry, there's something going on.
but, the committee had found, that they thought that the Whitney Road, Atlantic Highway Whitney Road was necessary. Atlantic Highway Duck Trap Road necessary. The one at the Harbor Drive, that's not a town leased light, so we can't talk about that anyway. But there is one at the Bayshore Church found to be suggested to be non-essential. Lily Lane, Beach Store, and David, can you clarify the 2 years on contract, where we are with that? Are we coming to?
Well, it's been a year plus since we did that
Yeah.
study, right?
So just potentially not renewing that one?
Yeah, I think with my email back and forth to Tammy at CMP, if we wanted to switch them all to LED,
Yes.
then any ones that have any life left on the contract some of that cost gets assigned to the new. So if we're going to eliminate some, I assume we're going to convert them all. If we're gonna keep any, we're gonna convert them. And then if we're going to eliminate some, I'd go back to Tammy and say, what's the cost and what's the savings if we choose to do these specific things? Because I think, yeah, it's in her note, the cost to remove right now is nothing because the average age is more than 15 years. But our average age might be impacted if we choose not to extend new ones, if that makes any sense at all.
Sure. So essentially that whole corridor between 173 and Bayshore
Yeah.
Church up to French's Cemetery could, as suggested by the committee, be eliminated because of all of the supplementary lighting there.
Yes.
And then the rest of them are more remote and darkened areas, which could benefit from illumination.
Now, they say a location of CMP streetlights rated non-essential. I just think now the Lamont Woodworking Shop in the center, I just feel that's part of the center. I just feel that one should stay. Where Morris Watts, maybe you don't know Morris Watts, but as you come through the center.
The next house
On the
beyond
right-hand
Sadowski's
side.
as you head towards
Yeah.
Drake's.
Yep.
The one closest to the library, but it's not anywhere near the library.
Yeah. Not,
Is it past the library towards
Yeah.
Drake's?
No.
yeah.
No,
I just think we should work to, and I think it
Between
would
the
just keep it
library,
safe,
yeah.
although it doesn't slow the traffic down, I realize that.
I would agree with you, Kern, to keep basically follow this this year, except keep that one.
Yeah.
So that would mean we would continue to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lights. Is that correct? If you include pole number 507, the one in the center,
Oh, is that what it is? Is that the number on it?
I believe so.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Mhm.
I don't think that would reduce safety at all, do that.
What about the one just heading out of town on Atlantic Highway at French's Cemetery?
That's by dots, right?
Yeah, correct.
That is on this list of
Non-essential, yeah.
They've got their own lights anyway, right?
At the cemetery? Or dots, yeah.
Do we, well,
Do we want to ask the committee if they want to say something?
yeah.
Sure, do you want to tag someone to come up and chat with us?
Tag.
Somebody else can do this time.
Yeah, Jim Dunn on Tanglewood Road. As far as that one at Dots, I feel that it's not essential because it's actually in front of someone's house. It isn't really in front of Dots.
Yeah.
And Dots does have, you know, they have their own lights for their business. Just doesn't seem like it's necessary. I have one other thing that's a little bit off record here, but related to lights, and that is, David, I heard you say that you might upgrade the existing lights that we recommend keeping with LED bulbs.
That's the plan, yeah.
And so I'm just wondering if you've given any thought, or if CMP has guidelines as far as the Kelvin, to make sure that they're not the bright.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they had, I think it was the 3,000
Okay.
warm white,
Okay.
something similar to what you folks had put in the report.
Okay.
I know that, because I checked.
just wanted to-
'cause I was
While you're
Put
while
their
you're up
hook in
there, while you're on the hook, and I wish I'd asked the representative from the Lobster Pound, but
Oh, yeah.
now at the end of my long day, I'm trying to think the light that's at Lily Lane. I know there are a lot of employees that utilize that parking area. I'm trying to, in my memory, that light illuminates. Not that we necessarily need to keep a municipally leased parking light to illuminate a private parking area,
Oh.
but that's
Yeah.
the one thing that springs to mind there
Yeah.
for consideration.
Yeah. At least in our notes, what we recommended is that, you know, everyone carries a phone these days. I mean, people have lights. If it's that dark, we just felt like they're gonna find it. But that was our recommendation. We just felt that there's enough light, even from the street lights, that would get them
Yep.
most of the way there. But I think we felt that I mean, that's your decision ultimately, what you wanna
So-
do there for convenience of the employees.
Their employees are walking up the sidewalk,
Yep. I mean, it's,
and if we take that light away, that's gonna, because they've got the lights in their parking lot or anywhere there, right?
No, they
right,
don't.
which one could argue
Because
it's
it's-
not necessarily our responsibility,
It
but
isn't, but.
I'm just saying it's there, so.
Right.
And I also, I guess, sorry, before I ask David this question, does anyone else have any other questions for Jim?
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure.
David, does it matter how many is there a critical mass of lights that CMP, or do they not care? If we have 2 lights, they'll convert them to LED, or it's not sort of like we have to have 10 or more to participate in this program?
No, they will lease you as many or as few lights as you wish.
Okay.
We will want to take what comes out of this meeting for a quote-unquote decision, go back and say, what we'd like to do is this. What financial impacts are different than what you've told us, you know?
Sure.
Can you confirm that it's still 0 to remove and blah, 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 blah,
Sure.
blah.
So is the board's general consensus that number 195, 181, 178, 177, 174, and 170 to not have the contract renewed?
Yes.
Yes.
So, David, do you want to take that
Yep.
information and get back to us?
Yep, out.
Fabulous.
And I guess since we're talking about streetlights, can I, David, just ask for an update on the streetlight, the municipally owned streetlights.
This-
Just an update on,
The sidewalk lights?
yeah, sidewalk lights.
Yep. Not a whole lot's changed since I dragged my foot the last time, in hopes to actually get that out to bid. Did find out that we have one sidewalk light that, well, it's right on the corner of 173 and Route 1, and in front of the Mills house, that we actually put we put a piece of sheet metal in to block the light from going back towards the house in the living room. And wanted to make sure that we could get some sort of shield for that, and that is available. It's called the house shield, but that was the last correspondence I had with the electrical guy. What's Jim's title? Salesman. He's not a salesman because you don't buy them from him. He's the representative of the lighting company, but the fiscal year was wrapping up, and I hope to have that out to bid and installed before the fiscal year ends. How's that?
Yeah, great.
So soon.
I didn't promise that.
Well,
Sooner than.
soon in municipal timeline standards,
Well,
David.
Unfortunately, there's a number of projects, and there's only so much time, and that one's not on the top of the list yet.
Okay.
Cindy asked me that question periodically too, to make her feel better.
Okay, and moving along,
Thank you all.
thank you very
Thank
much,
you.
yeah.
Thank you.
Lincolnville has had a vacancy on the EMS Performance Review Committee. I put in a community interest form.
Well, you got some extra time?
So much. I'm working on a clone.
I move that the board appoint Laidley Dunn to the EMS Performance Review Committee with a term ending June 2019.
I'll second it.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor? And I will abstain.
Thank you. For stepping up.
Thank you.
Thank you for your participation.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And moving rapidly along, for clarification's sake, wanted to just have a follow-up conversation with the board regarding extending communication to our partnering EMS communities. David, did you want to?
Sure. Last meeting, the board obviously had a little bit of a discussion about this. Reached out both verbally via telephone communication, and then followed up with an email to the managers and administrators of Hope, Camden, and Rockport about a joint meeting of the four boards at our invitation to review the goals and objectives of the four towns with regard to the provision of EMS, emergency medical services. Initial responses from managers and administrators was positive. They were going to run it by their board chairs and their board members, looking most likely at some meeting in early May. Thus far, Camden and Rockport have had a presentation primarily from the Camden Fire Chief. They're tentatively scheduled one for Hope for the 23rd of April. Not sure if that's something the board would want to talk to before they had their conversations with the other boards, or if you just want me to try to get as much information as I possibly can, provide that to you, and then if this is something we want to pursue after the joint meeting. It isn't, we certainly can have Chief Farley or somebody else come and make a presentation or a pitch. This isn't particularly time critical at the moment. It isn't something that anybody's looking to try to implement by July 1st, which is the upcoming fiscal year. We do not currently have a contract with Northeast for the coming year. They offered an extension at one point. which is no longer out there and on the table to the towns. They're not quite sure what they're doing. Since the information came out, they were honest with us and said that has impacted their ability to recruit staff, because who wants to come apply for a job that might be gone in a year, make a commitment. They are working on an extension that may be short term. They may be working on several extensions or possible contracts, short term and longer term. The at least verbal offer extended the other day was that they might be looking for a 5-year commitment from the communities, where our costs would be in essence locked at where it is, and then with some inflation factor a year for the next 5 years. They expressed a concern about the fact that they've gone out and bought a building. Now, that was their business decision, but it's probably more building than they might have needed if they were only going to do the transfers from the hospital to elsewhere versus transports, meaning pick up and delivery to the hospital. So they're in a little bit of a state of flux themselves in terms of their business concerns, which may or may not impact us, but the likelihood is a contract will be forthcoming at the current rate, but they may want to have some sort of out clause, for lack of a better word. So there's a lot of moving parts here. Nobody's said they're walking away from the 4 towns, but
Questions?
Does it make sense, considering Camden and Rockport have had presentations by the fire chiefs and Hope is going to happen, for us to invite the Camden fire chief, and I don't know if the Rockland fire chief is also part of presentations, to invite those two to present to us?
Maybe if the board wishes, to a certain extent. Right now we have a contracted service with Northeast Mobile Health Service. Some of the discussions have been to have a contract with the city of Rockland. To me, as an administrator, trying to help a board set some policy, it's always good if you can define the problems or what you're trying to solve before you go find a solution. It seems to a certain extent that thus far Camden and Rockport have had a potential solution pitched to them, and nobody's taken a half a step back to say what's going on, what's the problem we're trying to solve. But if you want to talk to a different vendor, by all means, we can roll in 1 or 10. Well, I don't know if we can find 10, but yeah.
So my concern is that I was on board with the idea of all the boards coming together and having a discussion, but since then, I am concerned that if we call for that, we're almost elevating the discussion even more. When for now it seems more just exploratory, just talking to fire chiefs, and which hearing that Northeast is a little spooked, I'm concerned this might spook them even more.
Yeah, I don't know if we can spook them much more, but
I mean, besides erroneous newspaper articles coming out stating that 4 towns were on board with this concept, being talk about putting words in other municipalities' mouths. So I guess my question is, who's the who that is going and making presentations? So who would be going to Hope, correct?
I don't know who's going to Hope. To Camden initially, it was the Camden Fire Chief, Chris Farley, I believe the Rockport Fire Chief, Jason Peasley, was in attendance as well. And Chris Wytock, who's the Rockland, I think he's called Fire Chief, but Fire and EMS both fall under his. And I'm not sure, but perhaps Tom Luttrell, who's the Rockland City Manager, was there as well.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but in my attempt to educate myself, I am unaware of any Board of Selectmen and or Rockland City Council approving or directing their employees to take the action that's been happening thus far.
I can't speak knowledgeably about the other communities. I know at least in some instances there's been conversation. I'm trying to think back to, I think it was the city of Rockland, about possibly looking at enhanced regionalization. And so if you have a broad overarching goal and your city manager and your department head goes off to do that, you've got some cover. Certainly now at this point, the Camden Select Board has at least tacitly supported examining options, and I believe the Rockport Board has done the same, although I haven't seen any minutes from their meetings. But they didn't say jump up and down and say no, don't do it either. I fall back to the crisis, that might be a harsh word, that was at hand years ago when Camden First Aid went from wanting a very small donation from the 4 towns to $400,000. And the select boards from the 4 towns met in Camden on a snowy night in January or February. Were you on the board then? Were you on the board then, Dave?
I think, I can't remember.
I can't remember either, but we met at Camden First Aid, and Camden First Aid rolled out the concerns that they had, and the select boards ultimately decided that perhaps we ought to pursue, see what other avenues are out there, and then staff went and got the ball rolling and came back, and they actually, I think each town appointed a couple of selectmen to serve on a exploratory committee.
Right.
And
then we reconvened.
Oh yeah.
As
right.
As the decision makers for the town. Sorry to interrupt you, David, but I mean, I just, procedurally speaking, if we take away the individual players, the partner managers of administrating, for lack of a better word, our EMS, our ambulance services, haven't identified that there's a problem, haven't had a conversation. It's hard for me not to get out of like procedure and like in an HR mindset of like, we haven't talked to who we're currently contracting with. We haven't identified an issue with who we're currently contracting with. And then furthermore, and understand, hopefully, what procedures we're obligated to go through to enter into a contract with any other body, whether it's another municipality, another corporation, another what. And I can't think of a time where we have gone out and sought, other than just for advice, a single contractor that we would anticipate entering into a contract with. And the fact that the managing partners haven't been collectively and simultaneously, as reasonably possible, brought into the same conversational loop is concerning. So I personally have zero interest in inviting or entertaining any single contractor to come and have a conversation with us. I mean, if we think that there's a problem or feel the need to put something out to bid, then we put something out to bid, and we let X number of qualified individuals petition us with information, a business plan, a financial plan, potential liability for our taxpayers. Short of that, why would we take our time to just talk about a neat idea? And correct me if I'm wrong, David, but thus far, there has been no conversation about sort of the fiscal or business plan for any potential.
No, everything that I've read or seen so far has been service focused, shall I say? And that's you know, we always look for our department heads or committee chairs to provide information in terms of enhancement, and I think that's where some of the effort has come in terms of Chief Farley and maybe perhaps some of the other fire chiefs about advancing this idea is a service enhancement. Things that they, in all likelihood, don't envision a particular contractor to be able to advance or do, or at least our current contractor may not be able to advance or do. So they've advanced this to their select boards. You know, we've had conversations here about some of the things that were advanced by our boards and committees during budget time to you folks, and you kind of said, well, it's a little cart before the horse. We should have had this conversation leading up to and information gathered. So I kind of lost my train of thought on that. It's you know, different communities have different procurement policies. We have different, for lack of a better word, philosophies about the provision of some of our services. It's not uncommon for larger communities to do some things more in-house. I'll pick on the town of Camden for a moment. They've got a public works department. We don't. Lincolnville doesn't have a public works department. We choose to seek out contractors for the work that we do in that regard. Camden, at some point in the way distant past, figured out that it was more beneficial to them to have, you know, Johnny on the spot ready when they needed something done in public works. And you know, you had the whole spectrum there from Camden to Rockport to Lincolnville to Hope. It's challenging when you're partnering and your partners don't all come from the same model you do. Mm-hmm. It adds the wrinkle. Sure. I'm sure we get 20 selectmen together if we can. We'll have 20 different ideas about way things ought to be done, and it's all well and good.
Sure, but at least we'll be having the conversation such as we did initially when we got into the initial contract with Northeast. I mean, I'm not opposed, nor am I for the idea, but procedurally, I see many issues with the way that this is going down, and, you know.
So has anyone from the neighboring towns reached out to us to come talk to us? For a potential?
I've had a conversation with Audra, the Camden town manager, regarding do you want to have does your board want to have some sort of presentation about what we're doing, and considering, and it's like, I don't know, I'll ask them. Here we are.
Yeah. I mean, I'll defer to the.
And it was after your last meeting when you said,
yeah,
you know, we'd like to reach out, and so just kind of.
I do want to make one point that you know, in a hypothetical, let's take, I don't even want to say something, but let's take something we contract out, and we had no issues with that that entity that had the contract. I think it would be improper to meet with a for-profit company and you know, in the middle of a contract where we have no issues, and just chat with them about how it would be if they had this contract. But I feel like because we're talking about municipally owned fire departments, it is different
How so?
to have that conversation. Because it's such a different model than contracting with a company, that to just simply put it out to bid in the future, it seems like there needs to be so much more groundwork before that's even possible.
But it still isn't our municipality, it still has to be staffed, it still has to be outfitted, I mean, there's
It's still very,
there's still,
Steps.
I mean, I don't see how another company or another municipality, what difference it makes in terms of liability to our taxpayers,
I just,
other than philosophically.
I just mean, it seems more okay to have a conversation with them beforehand.
I don't understand why, I'm sure you're not convincing me, just because it's another municipality? The city of Rockland, is that what you're saying?
I'm saying, yeah, because it's a different model. It's such a different paradigm shift from contracting with a for-profit that I guess
But you know that, or you're making that assumption?
No, I'm saying that's very different from contracting with a company. Like, they're just different. Working with in this model, my understanding is not only would we be contracting with Rockland, but Camden, Rockport, Lincolnville, Hope would also be buying additional ambulances. So it would be more than just a simple contract with Rockland. There's a lot of moving parts to it, and yeah, and so that's why, to me, just having a presentation from them is, I don't see the harm in it. Frankly, because the two towns have already done it, Hope's about to do it, and that's how this conversation is happening in our community, whether or not we like it.
I just think it's unfortunate that the other towns had it without the two smaller players being involved.
Mm-hmm.
I think out of respect that should have happened. You know, we're not as big as the other two. Certainly we're a little bit bigger than the smaller one, Hope. I don't like being muscled around, I guess, for a very blunt way to put it. And I think it's a good way to get egg on your face if you just go out there and just start doing this without identifying a problem and having the conversations in the right area first. You know, maybe that's the way things are going to be done with the way this is. I don't know, but I think we've got ourselves in the corner now. Our contractor is upset.
Yeah.
And I think we got a problem. So I don't know which way to go here.
I don't know, is they're upset? I think they're concerned. I mean, obviously
They should be.
you know, they made a pitch to the four towns 4 or 5 years ago about establishing an operation, and they're concerned that, you know, the plans that they've made and decisions they've made based on that are subject to change. They always are. I mean, everybody that does work for municipalities is subject to the whims of the voter. I shouldn't say the whims, but they did. And you know, I think they're disappointed. You know, they're disappointed that perhaps towns might want to go a different route, but we have to look out for the best interests of our citizens, and that really needs, in my mind, in Lincolnville, that gets decided by the 5 of you. You know, you decide what goes on the warrant, what you think is in the best interest, and you take that to the towns and present it. And the same occurs in our other partnering communities. The challenge becomes when you partner with somebody, you may have different goals. I mean, this is like a marriage to a certain extent where I want to paint the living room, yellow, and Michelle wants to paint it blue, or I want to do it myself and she wants to hire a painter. And you have to work that out with your partners as to what your goals are, what you're trying to accomplish, and how you best see that to move forward.
I guess along that vein, we can be unhappy with how this unfolded in the process, but our partnering towns are getting presentations from fire chiefs. They're gathering that information for their citizens, and I feel like we should be getting that information too. And the easiest way right now is to schedule a meeting with the Camden and Rockland fire chiefs. The process is not ideal. I'll grant you that, but we are partnered with these 3 towns, and this is.
Why would you want to talk with the other town's employees as opposed to the other town's managers?
I want to have a conversation with them too, but I am. If the other 3 towns want to have that conversation now, then yeah, let's do it. But if there's a concern that that's potentially elevating this before out of the proposal stage and into something more concrete, then I'd be concerned. If they were concerned that this was having that large conversation was premature versus just getting a presentation from the fire chiefs.
Well, in that case, then they could forward on their proposal in a non-agenda item and we could read it at our pleasure. I mean, I don't see why a formal presentation would need to be made then.
That's one way to do it.
I mean, what I would like to have a conversation with our partnering managers in regards to our emergency management services is there an issue that we need to jointly make a decision on and move on in some direction that would then validate and move forward any other use of our time as a board of selectmen. I mean, I feel like a broken record, but I don't really care what other municipalities choose to do with their time. But I do care in as much that it could potentially affect our taxpayers. And so I think having a service-oriented conversation is absolutely warranted. Let's have that conversation. Let's talk about it. Are there inefficiencies? Are there deficiencies? Are there aspects of the conversation that we have not had, we haven't looked at? Yeah, David.
I brought this up a little bit at the last meeting, but it looks to me from what I've been studying and watching this as much as I can read what's going on everywhere, and it looks to me like this whole thing is driven by a way to enhance and procure more firefighters and cross-trained personnel, which is a wonderful thing. I'm not against this anything at all. And Camden is being included in this with Rockland because they're already up to, I think, 2 people in-house now, and probably with growth in a few more years they will have 2-3 more people in-house like Rockland does. Not as many, but as a larger number that are cross-trained and can do all these things. And for these communities, this is a valid step in the ladder to go and for their advancement and for their doing everything. But where's that leave Hope in Lincolnville? We're not going to have full-time fire departments. We're not going to have full-time, we're not going to want anybody sitting in the station 24/7. We can't afford it. We don't hopefully need it. We've got a very good crew, a very good department. They take care of everything wonderfully for us. It's going to leave us, Lincolnville, and I believe Hope too, but in position where we either go along with whatever they want to do, which won't fit probably our mix, or we're on our own trying to figure out who we're gonna make a contract, if we do with anybody, for ambulance service. I feel, as I said the other night, I feel attacked a little bit by the newspaper article saying how Lincolnville is involved in all this and is partner in all this, and nobody, unless I missed that meeting, has come and talked to us yet and said, you know, this is what we're considering, you're part of this. What's your take on it too? True, like with Midco Solid Waste, we're only a small part of it. We're not enough to change the numbers on anything, but it's nice to be included. And not being included kind of leaves us, okay, well, where are we gonna fit into this, if at all? Or do we need to be starting talking to other communities that we might be able to draw some ties with to provide these services? Because they are saying, from what I've seen written in the papers, how it's going to increase decrease the amount of time it's going to take for ambulances and services to get there. Well, from Rockport, where our present people are based, and Rockland, where this one's going to be based out of, it's another 10 minutes. It's not going to speed things up any. I mean, maybe they will put an ambulance in West Rockport Station like they're saying. Maybe that there is a space, I believe, in Lincolnville when it was built, when Cameron First Aid was still around, there's a space there. Well, there used to be. Maybe that's in the plans, but I know, well, this is a long way out, but long ways, time flies. Things happen very, very slowly, but before you know it, it's here.
Yeah.
And I guess I just feel that decisions are being considered and made about us that we aren't being given the same information about what's going on about our potential involvement, what it could be, or what it might mean to us.
Well, that's why we need to talk to
But
some other fire chiefs or select boards, but we
well,
definitely need to.
that's one of those things that we need. That conversation needs to be had. I guess it's just my having issues with the whole way things are going on. I mean, normally, if I think if I want to do something, and Kern would be very nice to be involved in it, first thing I would do is go talk to Kern and say, hey, this is what I'm thinking about, Kern. You know, what's your feelings? You think you might be interested in this? You think this might fit your way a little bit? Or would I print it in the newspaper and have Kern pick it up and read it? You know, I mean,
Yeah, I mean,
I mean, I'm making too much of a little thing here, I'll grant you, but it rubs me bad.
Can I offer a suggestion to maybe move us off the dime a little bit? Glad to listen to this conversation because it's good to have policy set by policy setters. Perhaps since we're, excuse me, not tonight, we don't have a full board. We're not going to have a full board at the next meeting. Perhaps I can obtain any information that has been presented to the other towns, get that for your next packet as a non-agenda item, and we'll continue to work on the scheduling of a 4-town meeting that we've tried to start the wheels in motion. And if, after looking at what's been handed out and talked about, if there's anything handed out, we can see where our meeting falls and have a conversation about which comes first, the group or the smaller group. At least you'd have something know about what's been conversed thus far, and we can try to arrange this for a time when we have, ideally 5 of you here to participate either in a joint meeting or in the hearing of a pitch or both.
Yeah, I mean, there's no burning timeline that I'm
No.
aware of.
I mean, my concern obviously is the immediacy of July 1
Yeah.
continues to be, where we've been promised to have the next version of a proposed northeast extension, either by end of April or early May. And you know, once we get over the short-term hump, we have the long-term conversation, because nobody's looking to jump today or July 1, but it might have been nicer if we'd actually had a signed contract before we decided we were going to explore the next option.
Yeah, that would have been way more ideal.
Yep, very nice.
Yeah. Yeah. And I want to clarify, it's no offense to Camden, any fire chiefs, anywhere.
No.
But I would like to shorten the amount of side conversations and just have an initial conversation with the decision and policymakers of our partner towns. Any, you know, like all water under the bridge, like let's have a face-to-face and say, okay, where are we? It's been X number of years since previous boards initiated this relationship with our current contractor. Clearly, it's time to have another conversation.
Yeah, I mean, we have to make sure that the goals and objectives of the 4 communities are either the same or at least acceptable to all, because otherwise the marriage doesn't work.
Right. And if that's the conversation, then we need to have that too, you know, but let's have the conversation. I'm not interested in being swept along by any tide or current coming from any direction. Yeah, so I guess we'll just continue that conversation in terms of the when and the where and the how.
I'll push to get some dates at as best I can push other towns
Okay.
for that conversation.
Yeah.
And I'll get some other information if it's available.
Yeah, in the meantime, I'm very interested to read any and all information that's available beyond what's already out there. Okay, if there's nothing further on that particular item, we do have the treasurer and payroll warrants to approve and sign.
I move that the board approve the treasurer's and payroll warrants.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing nothing, all those in favor? And is there any other business that the board wishes to discuss? Okay, can we have a final motion then?
I move to adjourn.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing nothing, all those in favor? Thank you very much.